There's a poisonous lie society tells you about failure. A lie that keeps millions of people trapped in mediocrity, trembling with fear at the prospect of failure, when they should be racing toward failure as if their lives depended on it. Because, in fact, they do. The lie is this: failure is the opposite of success. The truth is far more disturbing and infinitely more liberating. Failure is not the opposite of success, it is the path to success. It is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of real education. It is not proof that you are worthless, it is evidence that you are finally playing a game big enough to be worth it. Every truly wealthy person on this planet has one thing in common: they've failed more times than most people ever try. Henry Ford went bankrupt 5 times before creating the Ford Motor Company. Walt Disney was fired for lack of imagination and good ideas. Steven Spielberg was rejected from film school 3 times. Colonel Sanders was rejected by 1,900 restaurants before someone accepted his chicken recipe. They didn't get rich despite their failure. They got rich because of their failure. Every failure was a college lecture in disguise. Every rejection was a divine redirection. Every door that slammed in their faces forced them to develop muscles they never knew they had. But here's what most people don't understand about this dynamic. Failure isn't democratic. It doesn't teach its lessons to everyone who stumbles. It only reveals its secrets to those who refuse to interpret failure as the end of the story, to those who treat every failure as valuable data, not as evidence of personal incompetence. The difference between the rich and the poor isn't talent, luck, or family connection. It's the ability to extract wisdom from suffering, to transform defeats into discovery, to use every scar as a map to buried treasure. The poor shy away from failure. The rich collect failures like trophies, knowing that each represents a lesson their competitors never had the courage to learn. Thomas Edison didn't invent the incandescent light bulb. He invented 10,000 ways not to make an incandescent light bulb. When a journalist asked him how he felt about having failed so many times, Edison replied, "I haven't failed. I've discovered 10,000 ways that won't work." This wasn't just a clever answer. It revealed a mindset that separates wealth creators from wealth consumers. Wealth creators understand that failure is feedback, not a verdict. It's information, not condemnation. It's redirection, not rejection. They have developed the most valuable skill a human being can possess: the ability to fail upward. Failing upwards means using each failure as a springboard to a higher level of understanding, competence, and courage. It means treating each failure as an opportunity to rise stronger, wiser, and more determined. It means recognizing that the universe isn't trying to destroy you, it's trying to educate you. But this education isn't free. It exacts a price most people aren't willing to pay: humility in the face of the unknown, persistence in the face of uncertainty, courage in the face of others' judgment. Most prefer the security of guaranteed mediocrity to the risk of possible greatness. This preference for security is precisely what keeps most people financially trapped. They choose secure jobs over risky opportunity. They choose predictable salaries over potential profits. They choose the approval of others over the approval of themselves. And by making these choices, they ensure they will never experience the kind of educational failure that creates real wealth. Abraham Lincoln lost more elections than he won before becoming president. He went bankrupt, had a nervous breakdown, and lost the Senate twice. But each defeat prepared him for the victory that would define not only his life, but the course of American history. His defeats were not detours from his destiny, they were the path to his destiny. The inconvenient truth no one wants to face is this: you are exactly where you should be based on your current tolerance for failure. If you're financially stuck, it's because your fear of failure outweighs your desire for success. If you're living a small life, it's because you've chosen the safety of your comfort zone over the uncertainty of growth. But here's the liberating news: you can change this equation at any time, not by changing your circumstances, by changing your relationship with failure. Not by waiting for perfect conditions, by building imperfect courage. Not by seeking guarantees, by embracing uncertainty as the price of true education. Andrew Carnegie, the richest man of his time, said something that should be engraved in the mind of every person aspiring to wealth: the person who makes no mistakes generally does nothing. He understood that inaction is the only true failure, because it is the only kind of failure that teaches nothing. Carnegie started out as a telegraph worker, earning $2.50 a week. He made mistakes that cost him fortune, made decisions that nearly destroyed him, and faced failure failures that would have crushed lesser men. But each mistake made him more insight. Each bad decision made him a better decision maker. Each failure made him more resilient. When he sold his steel company for $480 million, the equivalent of over $15 billion today, he wasn't just selling steel. He was selling decades of wisdom distilled from failure, lessons learned from pain, strength forged in the fires of adversity. This is the secret alchemy of wealth creation, turning lead into gold, defeats into victories, failures into fortune. But this alchemy doesn't happen automatically. It requires a fundamental shift in how you perceive, process, and respond to failure. Most people see failure as evidence that they're not good enough. The rich see failure as evidence that they're trying hard enough. Most people use failure as an excuse to give up. The rich use failure as fuel to intensify. Most people fear that failure will prove their inadequacy. The wealthy fear that avoiding failure will prove their inadequacy. Most people plan to avoid failure. The wealthy plan to maximize learning from their inevitable failure. This difference in mindset isn't just philosophical, it's deeply practical. It determines what opportunities you pursue, what risks you take, what dreams you pursue. It determines whether you play to win or play not to lose. And this difference determines everything. J.K. Rowling was at rock bottom when she wrote Harry Potter. Divorced, a single mother, living on welfare, considered a failure by all conventional standards. 12 publishers rejected her manuscript before one finally said yes. If she had taken those 12 rejections as her final verdict, the world would never have known the boy who lived. But she didn't.
She investigated. Each rejection gave her insights into how to improve her approach, refine her proposal, and find the right publisher. She turned failure into feedback, rejection into redirection, despair into determination. And in doing so, she not only created one of the greatest literary fortunes in history, she proved that failure is often the last step before extraordinary success. The problem is that most people stop one step short of the miracle. They give up when they're 5 minutes from dawn. They abandon the gold when they're just a few feet from the main vein. They interpret resistance as rejection when in fact it's just the universe testing how serious their commitment is. This test isn't cruel, it's wisdom. The universe doesn't want to give true wealth to people who can't handle it responsibly. It doesn't want to hand power to people who haven't been tempered by adversity. It doesn't want to grant success to people who haven't learned the lessons that failure teaches. And what are these lessons? The first and most important is humility. Failure has a brutal way of destroying arrogance, exposing ignorance, and revealing the true extent of what you don't know. This forced humility isn't humiliation. It's the fertile soil where true wisdom grows. The second lesson is persistence. Failure separates tourists from residents, the curious from the committed, the dreamer from the doer. It asks, how badly do you really want this? And the answer to that question determines whether you stop or keep going, whether you give up or double down, whether you learn or simply suffer. The third lesson is adaptability. Failure forces you to question your assumptions, challenge your strategies, and reimagine your approaches. It forces you to become more flexible, more creative, and more resourceful. It transforms you from someone who knows one way of doing things into someone who can find 1,000 ways when the first one doesn't work. The fourth lesson is courage. Paradoxically, the more you fail, the less you fear failure. Each time you survive what you thought would destroy you, you prove to yourself that you are more resilient than you knew. This courage, born of experience, is different from youthful bravado. It is calm, sober, indestructible. Richard Branson, founder of the Virgin Empire, embodies these lessons perfectly. He's failed multiple times, seen entire businesses crumble, and faced public humiliation time and again. But each failure has taught him something success never could. Each fall has forced him to rise stronger, smarter, and more determined. Today, he's worth billions, not despite his failures, but because of them. Every failed company gave him insights into markets. Every product that flopped taught him about consumers. Every failed strategy showed him better paths. He turned failure into a resume, defeat into a diploma, loss into profit. But here's what many people miss about stories like Branson. They're not about luck or exceptional talent. They're about a conscious decision to redefine failure from enemy to teacher, from end to beginning, from verdict to feedback. This reset isn't just a shift in perspective, it's a shift in destiny. Because when you stop fearing failure and start appreciating it, you free yourself to pursue opportunities most people would never consider. You become willing to try things that might not work out because you know that, even when they don't, you'll learn something valuable. Steve Jobs was fired from the company he founded. By any conventional measure, it was a devastating failure, but he later called it the best thing that could ever have happened to me. Why? Because failure freed him from expectation, forced him to rediscover his passion, and prepared him to return to Apple with the wisdom and humility necessary to create some of the most revolutionary products in history. If Jobs had interpreted his dismissal as evidence of personal inadequacy, he might have given up on technology altogether. If he had allowed the humiliation to paralyze him, we would never have had the iPhone, the iPad, or the digital revolution that transformed the world. His failure wasn't the end of his story, it was the middle. This understanding is crucial for anyone serious about creating real wealth. You can't avoid failure on the path to success. You can only choose how you respond to it. You can interpret it as evidence that you should give up, or as evidence that you need to improve. You can use it as an excuse to play small, or as fuel to play bigger. The choices you make determine not only your financial wealth, but your wealth as a human being. Because the process of failing upwards doesn't just create money, it builds character. It doesn't just develop skill, it builds soul. It doesn't just build businesses, it builds more complete, wiser, and more capable human beings. Oprah Winfrey was born into extreme poverty, abused, faced racism and sexism, and was fired from her first television job for being too emotional. Each of these failures and hardships could have been interpreted as evidence that she didn't belong in the media world. Instead, she used them as fuel to build a media empire that has made her one of the most influential people on the planet. Her experiences with poverty gave her empathy for those in need. Her trauma gave her understanding of human pain. Her initial rejection gave her the determination to prove her critics wrong. She didn't overcome these challenges, she turned them into superpowers. This transformation didn't happen automatically. It required a conscious decision to use pain as a teacher, not a prison. It required a refusal to see oneself as a victim, even when circumstances would justify that narrative. It required the courage to keep growing when it would have been easier to stop trying. This courage is what separates those who become rich from those who remain poor. Not physical courage, emotional courage. The courage to fail publicly, to be judged, to be misunderstood. The courage to bet on yourself when no one else will. The courage to persevere when all external evidence suggests you should give up. But this courage isn't an innate quality that some people have and others don't. It's a skill that can be developed and strengthened through practice. And the best way to develop it is to start intentionally failing at small things so that when you face bigger failures, you have the emotional muscles to handle them. Start a project that might not work out. Make a proposal that might be rejected. Try a skill you might not be good at right away. Not because you want to fail, but because you want to desensitize yourself to the fear of failure. You want to prove to yourself that you can survive what you fear most. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Instead of accepting this as evidence that he wasn't good enough, he used it as motivation to become better. He practiced more, trained harder, and developed a work ethic that set him apart from everyone else. When he finally made the team, he wasn't just good enough, he was on his way to becoming the greatest player of all time. But here's the important thing about Jordan's story. He wasn't content with simply making the team. He used the memory of that early failure to fuel a relentless pursuit of excellence. Every time he faced a challenge, every time he was losing a game, every time he doubted himself, he remembered the kid who wasn't good enough for the high school team and used that memory as fuel. This is the transformative power of failure. When you embrace it instead of avoiding, it doesn't just teach you specific lessons about skills or strategies. It teaches you who you really are beneath the surface. It reveals reserves of strength you never knew you had. It awakens parts of you that lie dormant during easy times. Real wealth isn't created during easy times. It's created during crises, when you're forced to find solutions you didn't know existed, develop skills you didn't know you had, and become someone you didn't know you could be. Failure is the catalyst for this transformation. Without failure, you remain who you've always been. With failure, you become who you were meant to be. Without failure, you operate within the limits of what you already know. With failure, you are forced to expand those limits, to question those assumptions, to reimagine what's possible. This expansion is what creates real wealth. Not just money, but wealth of experience, wealth of character, wealth of possibility. You become a richer person in every sense of the word because you were forged in the fires of adversity and emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable. Sarah Blakely cut off pantyhose legs to create what would become Spanx. She was rejected by manufacturer after manufacturer, laughed at at by investors and dismissed by retailers. Over the course of 2 years, she heard no more times than most people hear in a lifetime. But each no made her refine her proposal, improve her product, and strengthen her resolve. When she finally got a manufacturer to say yes, when she finally convinced a store to carry her products, she was no longer the same person who started with a simple idea. She had become an entrepreneur tempered by rejection, a businesswoman forged by failure, a visionary who turned obstacles into stepping stones. Today she's worth over $1 billion, not because she avoided failure, but because she danced with it. She didn't let hardships define her. She used them to refine herself. She didn't let rejections deter her. She turned them into determination. The lesson here isn't that you should seek failure for its own sake. It's that you should stop avoiding it like poison and start embracing it like medicine, because that's exactly what it is. A bitter medicine that cures the disease of complacency, that kills the virus of fear, that immunizes you against the paralysis of perfection. When you understand this, truly understand it, not just intellectually, but cellularly, your entire life changes. You stop making decisions based on fear of failure and start making them based on the potential for growth. You stop playing to avoid losing and start playing to win. You stop living a small life to avoid big problems and start living a big life because you've learned you can handle any problem. This shift in mindset is what separates the rich from the poor more than anything else. Not education, not connections, not seed money. It's the willingness to fail towards success rather than succeed at avoiding failure. It's the understanding that the surest path to mediocrity is always to play it safe. Because here's the ultimate truth that you understand. In life, you don't get what you want. You get who you become. And you only become the person capable of real wealth by passing the tests that failure offers, learning the lessons that only adversity can teach, developing the muscles that only endurance can build. Your failure is not your enemy. It's your most demanding teacher, your most rigorous coach, your most loyal friend, even when it doesn't seem that way. It's trying to give you what you say you want, forcing you to become the person capable of handling it responsibly. Stop running away from it. Start running toward it. Not because you want to suffer, but because you want to grow. Not because you enjoy pain, but because you want to gain. Not because failure is fun, but because it's essential to becoming who you need to be to get what you truly want. Your failure isn't the end of your rags to riches story. It's the beginning.